Hey everyone, happy Friday. This is Kent from 214 Alpha. I wanted to knock out a quick video before I go swimming again, because let's face it, there's a cold front in Austin, which means it's just 88 to 90 degrees, not Celsius, Fahrenheit, for those of you that aren't American, and that means that the swimming holes are relatively not occupied, which is a fantastic thing for an Oregonian that would be able to swim in these things if it were 70 degrees, again, for Fahrenheit, not Celsius. So I've put out a variety of these videos. 214 Alpha is a product and services company that helps communities keep their money and their affairs local, right? And so I've actually used a lot of the examples in our videos that talk about that. There's been a couple lately that's generated a lot of interest. One of them talked about how our solution, our technological platform and solution, could help real estate agencies improve the quality of their leads, could improve their referral business, and how they could generate an additional source of revenue to diversify their revenue stream. And then I get another example of how an old school hardware store could serve as a community hub to do the same thing, actually, to improve the quality of their customers. They could improve their referral business, and they could diversify their revenue stream. So they're great visions, and it's got people engaged. But the question is raised, how to start? How do I begin with that? And I did this about a month ago. I put out a video that talked about how a small town's Chamber of Commerce could use our solution to launch and sustain an economic stimulus without the need for governmental assistance, just using the wealth which is inherent to the community. And then the first questions I got is, how do I start? So I use the example of a farmer's market. So this video is in the same spirit. Like it's how do I start? Like I use two examples of a business to consumer vendor, and they want to get the benefits of improved customers, improved referrals, because your best customers know your best customers, and how to diversify revenue, right? Which is those are all considerations for a business owner, and they want to do though. They don't want this to be hard, right? Because they have other things to do, like go swimming with their kids in a creek, that's like this deep because it's Texas summertime. So I wanted to use this example and just talk about a customer loyalty program, because it's a great way to start. So it's pretty simple. And to use an example of a customer loyalty program, think about when you go to restaurants. This is really common. You go to a restaurant, and when you go to the register to pay for the food, there's often just this bowl that's sitting right there, and it'll say something like, put your business card in, and we do a drawing every Friday, and whoever gets chosen gets a free cinnamon roll or whatever, And the reason for this is obvious, right? You're going to get people who come in there all the time, like for lunch, right? I mean, if you're a restaurant owner, you want those people to continue to come. Those are consistent customers that are quality, and they're not a pain in the ass, and they've got really, they're probably just exactly who you want. And of course, you're trying to get them to keep doing this, right? So, think about if you own a restaurant, what you're trying to do is make the most of the asset you have, which is the location and the service and the whole deal, right? So, you pull the business card out of the fishbowl and you say, okay, hey, Susan from, State Farm, really appreciate you coming. We've given you a free dinner. And, of course, what you want is for her to invite more of her friends. And so this is a basis of trying to build some customer loyalty. You really want those customers to continue coming, and you want to extend it to what I would consider like a referral business. You want people like Susan. If Susan from the State Farm office down the street comes every single day, and she's a fantastic customer, and that type. I love restaurant work, by the way. I love the locals. It's so satisfying when you work in a restaurant and you get to know what other people like, and you say, hey, Susan, can I get you a tall latte? And she's like, thanks, because those are my people, right? People love that stuff, and I like it. It's something I enjoy about customer service. So, all those things are sort of tied into a loyalty program, and so there are a lot of loyalty programs out there. There's a lot of technological loyalty programs, but they're a pain and they're difficult. As I talked about, my wife owned a brick and mortar store in Portland, and I actually watched firsthand how this was difficult. And then, my dad had a wholesale spice business I was raised in, but we had a retail store out front. So I got to experience these things firsthand from a lot of different perspectives. And there's some challenges with these programs, right? One of them is adoption, really. That's one of the biggest challenges. It's consumer adoption. And it's really just because, man, people have a lot of stuff. Like, I mean, I know it's common for people to say people nowadays are dumb. That's not really fair to say. that's not, I don't think that's accurate, and I find it to be, it's missing the mark. I have 5 kids, right? So on my worst trip through the house on a daily basis, I can expect uh, 3/5 of them to be climbing off of me and screaming for 3 completely different demands. And I can assure you that my ability to comprehend language at that level is probably the 2nd grade level, because you can only take so much information, right? Likewise, what it's like to be an adult human being in contemporary society surrounded by messages and technology. It's too much, man. It is too much, right? I mean, we'll have a smartphone, but it's got 1,000 icons on the thing, right? And it's all these notifications and the whole deal. It's too much. So it's not that people are dumb. It's like having 1,000 children screaming in your face, right? So the thing has to be simple. So to give somebody a card, right? To say, here's a card. That's hard. They have to keep track of it. It's not terrible, but it's not ideal, right? You want to make this thing simple for them, and it's got to be right. It's got to be right in how they do business. It's got to be right there, and they've got to have some benefits to use this thing, right? And so, I've used the example several times before. Starbucks does a decent job of that. They actually have an app, and it has a built-in incentive to use this thing at the point of sale. And I use this example lots of times because it's pretty applicable. Let's say I go to Starbucks, I'm at the point of sale. I'm sitting in front of the register, and I say, "Hey, I would like to add $10 to my Starbucks app." And then once you do that, let's buy this cup of coffee for $2.50. And so I do that, right? And I have reasons to do so, because by doing it that way, it might seem like an extra step, but by doing it that way, I actually get a discount, right? I actually get more stars or whatever Starbucks calls it. By the way, full disclosure, I'm a gas station coffee guy, right? I mean, if you could sell me a cup of coffee for 35 cents, I would pay for it. I'm not a $2.50 cup of coffee guy. The Starbucks example is applicable, but I mean, I'm just not that dude. So I'm fascinated by it because it is actually an extra step just to pay a lot for coffee, in my opinion. I just am baffled why people pay so much for coffee. You go to the register and you say, I want to use this app, right? And I'm going to put $10 on there, and then I'm going to use some of it that's on the app to buy the cup of coffee. That's an extra step. But people do it because it gives them a discount, and now they have built-in incentive to continue to spend these Starbucks bucks, right? What you've actually done is the consumer has actually exchanged US dollars for a token, if you will. They've exchanged it for a proprietary buck that can't be redeemable. You can't go back to Starbucks and say, now I want my $7.50 back. It's not going to work. It's used exclusively for Starbucks goods, but it works and people dig it, right? And they like it because it gives them an additional return on investment for a service or for a product that they consider to be worth it. Not everybody's like me. I would say there's me and probably a lot of people in their 80s and 90s who would drink a 35-cent cup of coffee, would be completely satisfied. Most people have evolved beyond that point and have an appreciation for coffee that doesn't taste like something out of a fire pit at a camping site. But I happen to be that guy. So I know that people have an appreciation for high-quality coffee, but they would also like that return on investment, which comes from a discount, and that's why they use the app. So it's built right into there. So that is, one of the ways that you could actually do that is just tie it directly into there. That's one of the ways it could get around the adoption hurdle. But there's an additional thing, is that you could use the technological thing. What Starbucks could technically do, and I think they probably do a good job of, is that if the app is going to be on the device and people are using the app, they could let them know. They could send them a notification and say, just for the next 5 days, we'll give you an additional 25% off if you spend on Christmas items or whatever. You could do that stuff. In fact, technically, Starbucks could do it where you don't have to go into the store, although they have a reason why you'd want them to go to the store. But you get what I'm saying? Starbucks could leverage this thing to do what we would consider e-commerce on a mobile app. But they have built-in incentive to bring people into the store because they want the experience. They sell lots of other stuff. So anyway, that's one of the ways that you can do that. And then the additional barrier to adoption has to do with fraud. And there's fraud from different directions. My wife had a clothing resale store for mothers and children. And so, an example of fraud in that case is that you have people that'll come in and they'll trade inventory. They'll say, well, I'm going to bring you stuff, used baby carriers and stuff like that. And so, they have an option of getting cash, or they get a better return on investment from the trade-in if they get the loyalty token. But then there are some of those people that will only buy goods with the loyalty token, which doesn't actually bring any benefit back to the business, right? I mean, they bring inventory in, and then, unless you've really managed the quality of the inventory coming in, all you're doing is trading used inventory for your other inventory, and you're losing labor. It's just like it's a false economy. So there's a lot of really interesting ways that people can kind of con those systems. So, the important consideration, of course, is that you figure out how to instrument the system so you as the business owner aren't getting defrauded, right? Like if you want to reward Susan for being a good customer, you don't want somebody within her friend network to manipulate that in a way that hurts your business. So I mean, I've just talked through a couple of those things, and so, what we are is we're a mobile application, and it is a platform that can facilitate just exactly that. But it's front end. It's actually the entire experience is you get a lot of really high fidelity support from us, and I'll talk through this in a moment. We have 7 pre-integrated functions, and you don't need to know a lot of this because the supposition is that you don't have the interest as a business owner to build your own IT staff. Some people do, but most people just want to focus on their business, and so they would prefer to just pay somebody else to handle this stuff as long as it brings them value. So we have 7 pre-integrated functions, and the reason for it is that you could focus on the quality of your business, right? So the first one is digital identity, and it's a really important function as it pertains to trust, and it has to do with anti-fraud. You need to know that these people are who they claim to be. It's got to be absolutely clear. So, this is an exclusive community. This is a community of those that are around a certain restaurant, and there's a certain, a certain camaraderie. My grandma used to go to this place called Coffee Ann in Astoria, and it's one of those old school places. Had a little counter that turned around like this, and there was consistently like 15 or 20 people in there. But man, that was the hub, and there was an exclusivity to that, and it was a strong referral and a reputation network just based on who you knew. That's a really important consideration. So, you could technically just bring anybody you want onto the app, but you're going to want to, if you want to build high trust and low fraud, you're going to need to put some work into that. And as I've shared in other videos, I have significant professional experience and industry expertise as it pertains to the use of false and fake identities for the purposes of fraud. I'm a security guy, and I've helped catch bad guys and send them to jail. I know how to find the use of fake accounts. And so this is my company. We built it ground up to really discourage that. And you do that not just through digital identity, but there's identity verification. And there's some really sophisticated identity verification you can do using social reputation without using a lot of technology. Because we're not talking about this example here is I'm not talking about building a technology that, is going to have 100 million users. I'm talking about an exclusive community here, right? So if it's, if we're talking about a restaurant, you're not going to need to do a retinal eye scan for identity verification. What you're going to need to do is to verify that a person who says that they are who they claim to be, they better know some pieces of information that they could only know if they had met this person in real life, something that is high fidelity but not necessarily leveraging some other vector. And so there's some cool stuff that we can do with that. And it's not super expensive. It's actually right there. So again, that's digital identity, the first thing. Second thing is communication. That's the ability to 2 or more people to interact. And the example that we have within our product is a chat-based capability, and that's really common. I mean, a very large majority of people who use a smartphone know how to engage in, chat, basically. It's like sending a text message, or it's like sending, having a group chat on Facebook Messenger. It's just to engage with people. And in the case of our product, that could be used as, if you're running the restaurant, you could actually send somebody a message and say, hey, Susan from State Farm, we really appreciate you coming in. We want to give you a substantial discount if you want to throw your company party at our restaurant in November, right? So then they could interact and they could negotiate and they could talk about this using the app. And of course, from the restaurant's perspective, that's a great opportunity to use what you already know to be a good customer. You really want she and her connections to come into your facility and make the best use of that place because you want to get the bigger bang for the buck. So anyway, that's the second thing is communication. The third thing is commerce. We are essentially a commerce platform, and we provide actually a lot of sophistication built right into this thing. So, again, we're talking about a loyalty system, but you have the basis of doing buy, sell, trade, auction. You could technically support payment plan and subscription. So those are pretty interesting dimensions on this thing. Is that, again, let's say that you're a restaurant and you want to build in incentive for somebody to purchase a certain number of loyalty tokens, loyalty bucks, sort of like the Starbucks example. But there's a lot of really cool stuff you could do with that. You could actually extend some pretty unique business models out to your customers. Let's say that you started as a retail store, as a retail restaurant. And let's say, actually, there's this place called the Fishwife in Portland. It's kind of an understated place, kind of a hole-in-the-wall place in North Portland. Easily one of the best fish food in Portland, but it's so completely understated. It's fabulous. And I grew up next to the ocean, so I have a particular snobbery about fish. It just has to be like freshly out of the ocean, or I'm just not going to eat it. They have amazing fish, but then that family, they've put a lot of work into having that family develop a real expertise as it pertains to culinary quality. And it's, you could have a restaurant, which they'll have a restaurant, but they could open a catering business if they wanted. And so, in that case, it would be an extension to this loyalty thing that you could offer some pretty sophisticated options to more niche customers, and it's built right into the platform. But you don't have to do that right off the bat. It could be as simple as point of sale, right? Like, in the point of sale system, let's say that Susan from State Farm comes in and she buys something and she's got her loyalty thing because she comes in every single day, and you love Susan. So, she could pay in US dollars, but she basically buys in the loyalty buck. And it's just as simple as this. At the point of sale, she's standing at the register, she's talking, she just goes bloop, and it uses a little barcode thing that's in the app, and she pays for the meal using the app. And it's not super sophisticated. She's not blah, 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 some fancy thing. It's just as simple as swiping it just like it does at the Starbucks thing. So that's commerce. The fourth capability is banking, and we call it banking. There's a digital currency, so you've got to be able to receive and you've got to be able to send this currency, and that's pretty simple. I mean, I just talked about one of those cases. Let's say I'm Susan, and I've won the fishbowl drawing, and I just got 100, frog dollars or whatever, and so boom, she's got it in her app. Cool, she gets to get a free lunch, a free week of lunch or whatever, and every time she's at the register, she just goes beep, and she gets it, right? That's a great example of receiving and sending, and it just happens to be there. But there's some pretty cool stuff that's built into this. We also have the ability of doing crowdfunding and microcredit loans. So that might not make any sense in the context of a restaurant, right? Like, why would you do crowdsource funding? But if somebody, let's say that your restaurant serves the needs of a local charity or whatever, and let's say that they might want to ask all of your customers, let's say that you're running a restaurant and you have, 6,000 customers who come in, every month. You might want to, let's say you're probably doing promotions to them from the app saying, hey, come in on Tuesdays and we have, such and such, it's great, whatever. But you might want to actually use that to do some in-network, some in-community marketing, and to say we're working in conjunction with Loaves and Fishes, or we're working in conjunction with the Boy Scouts of America. And we would love it if you were to just donate. If you were to donate, 5 of your frog dollars to this particular campaign, then we would be able to do something, right? We could give you an additional discount or whatever. And that allows you to really start building that esprit de corps, that network sense of belonging that will be exclusive to the community. It's one of those examples of how you could gateway into the more extensive use cases, I talked about before. So, so that is an example of how then you transition over into more sophisticated examples of banking. So that's banking. The next one is reputation. We have a reputation system that's built in. Again, as I talked about, my background is anti-fraud, and that is a really, just as an interesting aside, the use of fake profiles in the pursuit of fraud is actually technically called Sybils. It actually references a movie from the 70s or whatever, 80s, I don't know. And it's a single person driving a lot of fake profiles to manipulate the perception of reality. And in the context of defrauding reputation systems, it's most common to just pick up a lot of what they call PVAs, phone verified accounts, or basically fake accounts, bot accounts, and then you use automation infrastructure or bot harnesses to hammer at someone's reputation. And the most common thing is that someone will pay, like one of the competitors to my wife's business had purchased a public relations assistants, and what they did is they purchased a bot army to give them, thousands of 5-star reviews, which was ridiculous. I mean, you don't get statistically doesn't make any sense. But of course, most people don't know that these systems are manipulated. You can run that the other way as well. You can actually purchase a bot harness to hammer at someone's reputation and give them a 1.2 star rating, which is what happens on Yelp all the time. So we've built the reputation system from the ground up to be resistant to fraud. And one of the things that you do, for instance, is to make sure you don't get fake accounts on the platform. That's one of the vectors. But the other one is that it's similar to Airbnb and Lyft in that you don't get to rate somebody unless you have actually engaged in a transaction. And but there's other dimensions to this as well. The reputation system actually technically pays you. And that was an interesting nuance that might be counterintuitive at first, but it's actually a form. It's actually how users of the system could get a frog dollar. It's actually how they get reputation, is by being, just by virtue of being a good customer, they get a reputation. But the reason you do it that way is that you will never earn more in reputation than what you had to spend on the transaction. And so, you know, if you had to spend $20 on the frog dollars on the meal at, you know, a restaurant, you're not going to get anything more than that in reputation. So it removes the return on investment. And so, you know, somebody might figure out how to contrive a way to do so, but there's no rational reason to do it, right? But that also opens up a lot of really interesting dimensions. The reputation system itself is actually really sophisticated. I spent a decade in manufacturing. This is global manufacturing. I worked at Xerox and I worked at other companies. And so, you know, when I mean global manufacturing, I mean there would be a manufacturing facility with robots and stuff moving up, and then there'd be one in Malaysia doing the same thing. And these things fill into containers, and they go into container ships, into harbors, and they go all around the world. So I've seen this stuff. And what is consistent within this industry, manufacturing, and is permeated other industries, is this use of what they call statistical process controls to identify bottlenecks within processes. And you know, that's sort of my thing, right? I won't nerd out on this too hard because it's pretty weird if you don't have any background in it. But let me assure you that pretty much every modern manufacturing and well operationalized service offering out there is using these process controls. Anyway, that's built into the reputation system we have. So the idea behind it is that you can't improve it unless you can measure it. You have to measure it to improve it, right? So ultimately, the reputation system we have is instrumented in such a way that it's a mix between qualitative and quantitative measures of success, right? And so you don't have to go all or nothing on this. This is something that you can step into. But you know, let's say you're a restaurant owner and you want to just put together a reputation system so you could show, and it doesn't even have to be something your customers see, but you might want to see, at least on your end, like, who are your highest quality customers? Like, if it's Susan that's coming every single, I mean, let's say that Susan comes 5 out of 7 days, and she's a great tipper. Actually, I love tipping. I love going to the same places all the time, and I'm a big tipper because I believe in loyalty and I believe in building those relationships. So let's say that Susan goes to the same place, she orders the same thing every time, and she pays a big tip. She has a great reputation score. And of course, as a business owner, you want to find out who these people are, because if you find out through this type of analysis, you look at it on your side of the application, you say, man, I've got 6,000 customers, but about 5% of them are people like Susan. I want a whole lot more Susans. You want to be able to model that so you can actually grow your business, right? So that's built in, that's the reputation thing, and it builds out from there, right? So let's say that at some point you want to extend the use of this application to negotiate loyalty relationships with your suppliers. Like I talked about the restaurant in North Portland. You know, they get their fish from the same place that some of the most high-end fish places in town get. So they've got this really great relationship, but you know, you might want to actually model those relationships in the same way. That turns into the use of the same sophisticated process controls that are used in large enterprise. You'd be able to use them in your small business in negotiating and you know, navigating how you work with your different vendors. So anyway, that's reputation. I have an entire video on this if you want to view it. It's and I could talk about this at length for a long time. The next of the 7 functions is arbitration. You're going to have conflict. There's going to be disputes. It's just how the world works, and I don't think there's anything we should be afraid of or shrink from. That's actually just part of it. It's the, you know, as Jefferson said, Thomas Jefferson said, the boisterous sea of liberty is never without a wave. You're going to have that. That's actually a symptom of health. You're going to have these disputes. You're going to have conflict. It's okay. It just needs to be productive. When people say they're not People say I'm non-confrontational. That's not really true. I would say that most people are not productively confrontational. They go from zero to blow up overnight. We use a system that is actually what's called a private administrative process using Notary, and it has a built-in way of encouraging people to work together and in a mutually beneficial way. And we use this leveraging common law precedent, which is based in legal precedent going back to the Roman era. So it's admissible in every jurisdiction on earth, and you don't have to use a lawyer. How cool is that? And it's built into the reputation system. So, you know, you're going to get people who are, when these people exist, you're going to get people who are inherently biased towards trying to con the system in a way that favors them. And of course, you want a built-in way to discourage them from being, from burning bridges. You really want to encourage them to be mutually beneficial. And one of the dimensions of our, going back to the reputation system, one of the dimensions of our reputation system is what I call salvage. And salvage will reward people for innovating ways to reduce the statistical rates of conflict and arbitration. And we can justify that because they're just helping us optimize our system. But think about that, right? Think about that. Let's say that you have this ongoing conflict with a certain community of customers. And let's say that somebody comes up with a way to manage that conflict. Actually, there was this great example in the Seattle area. There was a restaurant owned by a Vietnamese family, and due to a translation error, a misunderstanding, it was thought to believe that they were saying that the police weren't welcome there. That's not at all what they were saying. But it turned into this massive thing. And the person who bridged that gap was someone that was able to just say, you just don't understand what they're saying. They're actually saying that you're welcome here. Like they were actually, what they were trying to do is to say, we understand that some people aren't accepting of you, but we do, right? It was a simple misunderstanding. In the context of our reputation system, we would reward that person for innovating that, that resolution, right? So anyway, that's arbitration and reputation kind of going together. The final function is governance, and I know that people freak out about the word governance, that you shouldn't. I'm not talking about government. I'm not talking about the European Union or Congress or whatever else. Governance in the context of private enterprise is, I mean, it's, let's say you walk into a big company and say, can you show me examples of governance? They'll say, oh, you must mean corporate governance. And what they'll do is actually show you policies and procedures, access and permissions, and roles and responsibilities. That's basically what they're talking about. And what's cool about corporate governance within a well-functioning company is it's almost entirely invisible because it's not supposed to be in the way, right? It doesn't mean it doesn't exist. I'm not talking about like complete chaos here. I'm talking about just enough governance to get the job done and nothing more. So that's built in. That's built right into the product. And I've just talked through 7 functions, which seems like that's a lot, and it is a lot. But we make that available in a single mobile application with a single user interface, right? And, you know, let's say that you're a restaurant and you want to use this application. How do you start? You contact us and we have this high-fidelity conversation, and I do a lot of talking with my hands, and we come up with ways that you can build out a pilot for this. But, I mean, just within a few weeks, you would get your own version of the app that would have your brand on it. We're a private label vendor, right? So it's not going to say the 214 app. It's going to say the Fishwipe app, or it's going to say the, you know, Fishwife, or you know, the whatever your store is. It's going to have it on that app. And, you know, it has digital identity, the ability for people to claim who they are, show who they are, and have communication, commerce, banking, you know, has that stuff built in. So you'd be able to take that to your community and say, look, you can download this app, download us and use our loyalty app, right? So, and that's just within a few weeks. Now, there's going to be customization that's necessary, and one of the areas of customization that we do is what I would call, you know, integration with existing systems, and that's totally appropriate, right? We're not asking that you rip out all of your existing systems. That would be ridiculous. We have to integrate with what you've got, and so we also have that capability. And then we also have an engineering team that that can add on to functionality as necessary. So we can start small. Let's just do this. In fact, that's what we recommend. Start small. Start with a pilot. Do a bite-sized thing. It's perfect. It's what you have to do. I've been doing software for a lot of years. You don't go. By the way, the Facebook example annoys me. It's applicable, but it annoys me. People will use it as an example all the time. They say, look at Facebook. They've got billions of users, which is true, but it ignores a really important point. It started as a directory service for students at a single school, a single use case within a discrete community. You have to start small and then you build. Facebook started small, single use case, single community, and over a decade, they grew to where they are now. So you don't go from here to Facebook overnight. And those who tell you otherwise don't know what they're talking about. That's not how it works. If you're a restaurant and you want to use this thing, you've got to start small. You can't just go all at once. It doesn't work that way. Take it from me. I've been doing technology for a lot of years. If somebody tells you otherwise, they don't know what they're talking about. You have to start small. And then as you'll see in we have regular sprint reviews. A sprint review is enables you as the customer to meet with the engineering team every release, which we do every 2 weeks. We're relentless in our updates. We release all the time. And we show our notes because we want to make sure that there's an alignment between your evolving need, because they will evolve. That's how business works. If your needs have not evolved, you're probably in a dead business. Things change. Change is constant. So you might have stated you want to go this way, but there'll be drift there, here and there. And also, we may or may not understand what you're saying, because that's what happens, communication. So every 2 weeks we say, this is what we've done. And you'll see these on our site. We list the sprint reviews all the time. And you'll see that we're actually showing what we've done. We solicit feedback. We make the changes. Off we go. We go lather, rinse, repeat over and over and over again. And so in that way, you start small, single use case, single community, regular release cycles, do this feedback. And from there, you start with a really small, discrete use case, and you grow all the way up into your strategic plans. A final thing I want to share, actually, you can see on the whiteboard behind me, is the corporate VSEM. It stands for, look at me with my finger. Well, this is going to give me a stroke. Vision, strategy, execution, metrics, okay? So, and the top category is our vision, our corporate vision, and that's a 3 to 5 year plan, right? The second one is strategy. That's what we're doing over the next 1 to 3 years, or what, 3 to 5 years, right? And then the execution is the next year, and the metrics is how we measure if we're successful. This is an alignment of strategy on the top to execution on the bottom, and it builds from there. And I actually have an article that I've written on this. I'll post the link. I'll put the link to it in the video, and it's been chosen for an addition to the curriculum of a Master's in Sustainable Engineering course. And what it is a distillation of what I've learned in decades of doing managing development and releases within private and publicly traded companies. My expertise is execution. That's the company I built. That's our secret sauce. That's why we can afford to give away our secret information about what we're doing, because what we can do that others can is actually execute in a deterministic and relentlessly clear way. So but that's about it, you know. So like I said, I'm about ready to go swimming. Fishing, it'd be cool if I can go fishing. I'm going to go swimming. You know, contact us. Let us know if you want to talk about this. The way this goes is we end up having a conversation about your business, and then we just brainstorm about what this looks like. You know, I usually ask, what is your vision? What's your strategy? Right? Where are you going in the next 3 to 5 years? Because that's what we have to get into. And then let's go down to the execution. Where are we at with execution? And then how do we dovetail into that? And then the most important thing is, what are our measures of success? And you'll hear me harp on that. If you can't measure it, you can't improve it, right? So if you're going to put together a pilot, you've got to be able to quantitatively demonstrate that you were successful. And if you can't, the pilot might not be a good idea right now, but you've got to be able to cut bait so you can put that money somewhere else in your business. It could be that you're too early and you got to get to it in 2 years. That's better to find out quantitatively rather than slip down the rabbit hole on something that just ends up costing you lots of money. So anyway, I guess that's about it. Hope you all have a good day and a good weekend. Take care. See you.